At the end, we're delivering a box of sushi or a few burritos for dinner. These are really ultra affordable deliveries. So you have to be ultra efficient and you have to optimize the entire process from the drones themselves all the way to the operation on the ground. Part 135 is a huge step forward to showing that this can work and generate profit.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 394. What is a Chapter 135 certification, and how does it relate to drone deliveries? For that question, we head to Israel to speak with Yariv Bash, CEO and co-founder of Flytrex. Flytrex is a drone delivery company that partners with retailers and restaurants to offer fast, safe, and cost-effective airborne deliveries directly to customers' yards. Flytrex operates the largest backyard drone delivery service in the U.S., with delivery stations in North Carolina and Texas operating daily. The company has signed agreements with several of the world's largest retail and restaurant chains. Yariv has spearheaded Flytrex delivery services for 5 years. Prior to Flytrex, Yariv was founder and CEO of SpaceIL, a $100 million Israeli nonprofit organization that launched Beresheet, the first private interplanetary robotic mission to the moon in 2019. In January, Flytrex announced its longtime partner, Causey Aviation Unmanned, was granted standard Part 135 air carrier certification from the FAA. This allows Flytrex to operate and complete long-range, on-demand commercial drone deliveries in the United States. This milestone comes after years of rigorous training and testing, verifying that Flytrex drone delivery service maintains the highest safety standards. This approval has only been granted to a prestigious list of select companies, including Amazon Prime Air, Alphabet's Wing, UPS, and Zipline to date. Since successfully launching the world's first fully autonomous urban drone delivery system in Reykjavik, Iceland in 2017, Flytrex and Qazi have been working closely with regulators to help ensure the highest safety standards in getting drone delivery off the ground. Together, they participated in the FAA's UAS Integration Pilot Program, as well as the FAA's subsequent initiative Beyond, working with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to help tackle the remaining challenges of UAS integration. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Yariv talks about the Chapter 135 certification process, how it differs from a Part 107 certification, and how Flytrex and Qazi are now positioned to deliver restaurant orders to homes throughout the country. But before we hear from Yariv, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. Now let's learn about the Chapter 135 certification process with Yariv Bash of Flytrex. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Yariv to introduce himself.
Hi, so I'm Yariv Bash, co-founder and CEO at Flighttrack Aviation.
Yariv, what does Flytrex do, and how long has the company been in business?
Flytrex is just like any other on-demand delivery service, like Grubhub, Postmates, DoorDash, those guys. Only instead of using humans, we're using drones that we actually produce. So the delivery times are a lot faster, and both customers and restaurants pay a lot less.
Recently, Flytrex received FAA Part 135 certification to offer unscheduled, on-demand aerial services through its partner, Causey Aviation. First of all, what is Part 135?
Part 135, a standard air carrier certification. So basically, if you think about the aviation world, you've got Boeing, which produces airplanes, and then you've got companies like American Airlines, United, who operate those airplanes. It's happening in the same way with drones, especially for drone deliveries. You've got your operators and your manufacturers, your OEMs. So in this case, Flytrex is an OEM. We design and produce our own drones. And Causey Aviation, a local company that operates drones, have been granted the Part 135 to operate our drones. That's something that hasn't happened too much until now. We're the fifth company to receive that approval for their drones.
Is the certification effective now? Are you currently fully operating under 135?
So we're starting to transition to Part 135. There's still a long road for us. It's not just about the regulatory approvals. You have to make sure that your customers are happy with the service, and as you grow and mature, you meet new problems that you have to solve on the way that you haven't seen until now. And on the way there, we have to make sure that the service is profitable. Maybe in 2021, it was easier to raise billions of dollars and just burn them with, doing deliveries that are not really profitable. But in today's economy, you have to show that your delivery service can actually generate revenues and profits. So everything has to work simultaneously because we've just received approval from the FAA. Now we have to fine-tune the system and then ask for modifications for those approvals. And it's a bit of a back and forth. We've been doing that for a few years now. But the goal here is that during 2024, we'll be ready to start scaling the service way beyond the 4 stations that we have today.
Let's talk about the process that Flytrex went through to obtain the certification. When did you begin the process?
We began the process back in 2018 or 19 when we joined the FAA's integration pilot program, the IPP, that was all about the commercialization of drone operations in the US. And we knew from day one that this is going to be a long process. Certifying an airplane, certifying an air carrier, so the FAA are going to dedicate and are dedicating to make this a success. We realized that's the way to go. And we've been working with the FAA ever since then on literally weekly basis with multiple teams from the FAA, advancing really, one step at a time to show that you can do deliveries with drones, that it's basically becoming a reality. And for 4 small towns or 4 towns in North Carolina and Texas, this is already a reality on a daily basis.
Was the decision to pursue the Part 135 yours, or did the FAA encourage Flytrex to take that route?
It's more than encouraging. If you want to deliver goods for payment beyond visual line of sight, and if you want to make any money, then you need beyond visual line of sight, of course, the only path for that is Part 135. The FAA cannot waive or exempt BVLOS for deliveries beyond visual line of sight.
From my understanding, the Chapter 135 approval is defined by 5 phases, each with very specific requirements. Can you share your experience with that roadmap?
Well, this is still ongoing, but basically you have to certify both the air carrier, United or American Airlines, as well as type certify the airplane. And it's being treated like a manned airplane. You have to perform full type certification for the airplane itself. So you basically have to be a Boeing and certify your Dreamliner, and you need a United to be certified as an unmanned air carrier for deliveries that's being certified for that airplane. And as you could imagine, it doesn't matter if you're Amazon or Google or Flytrex, this is a lengthy process. So we've been certifying our airplane for the past 4 or 5 years, and Causey Aviation have been going through their air carrier certification for a few years now as well. Now the Part 135 was given to Causey Aviation with an exemption that allows them to operate the Flytrex airplane as if we've already passed through the entire type certification process. And that was given because we're pretty advanced in our type certification process with our airplane.
Does Flytrex manufacture its own drones?
Correct. You really consider the OEM, the manufacturer, and you have to control everything down to the bits in the code and the nuts and the gauge of the wires that you use on your drone. It's very different than just manufacturing your own drone. I like to give the example of certifying a new drug, for instance. So, you can buy a few chemicals online and mix them and maybe even drink it, and it might cure your headache. But from there to certifying a drug with the FDA, it's a very different process. It's the same thing. In our labs, any drone that you'll show me, we can probably produce something similar in a month or two. The big thing is certifying that as a commercial airplane with the FAA, not building the technical drone itself.
Did you have to demonstrate that the drone could fly safely over people, over buildings, and over everything else that it needed to?
It's more than a demonstration. We were talking about accumulating weeks of FAA inspections. Our drones have multiple redundancies. They can lose a motor, battery, GPS receiver. They can lose a lot and still just return on automatically. But let's say lightning strikes our drones, even though you're not supposed to fly when there's lightning conditions. So we have an independent system with its own logic that can fire a parachute and cut down the motors and sound the siren. And just that system for opening the parachute, we had to test it in 45 different scenarios with a third-party agency watching us. Just that system. As I mentioned, there's a reason it takes years.
And Causey Aviation is the entity that is actually conducting the deliveries for the restaurants. Is that correct?
Causey is an independent company. They have another company that's doing chartered flights in North Carolina and across the US. And they've opened another company for their unmanned activity. And they're an independent Part 135 air carrier.
How did Flytrex and Causey come together?
So back when the integration pilot program started, we were looking for a local company that was an air carrier already, that spoke the FAA language, that would be willing to be an operator for our drones. And we had a few options, and Causey by far were the best choice back then, and we still think they're the best choice for us to run through the process with.
Was Causey operating any drones at the time?
Back then, only manned airplanes.
So this was a new service. Was that a major challenge for them?
But here's the interesting part. Our operations are much similar to a Part 135 operation than to a Part 107 operation. So when you onboard a Part 135 operator, he has to learn a lot less than a Part 107, which at the end, to receive a commercial license for Part 107 operations, all you have to do is pass a 2-hour computerized test, and you're good to go. A Part 135 operator has gone through a lot already. They already have that heritage of Part 135. And it's not just the paperwork, it's the cultural way and the way that you treat your drones or airplanes in this case. So it was a very good choice to choose someone with that heritage and know-how.
So it took about 4 years for the certification to come through.
The system is still being developed and we always have new versions. The type certification is still ongoing. And at the end, it's just like, certifying a new drug. It never ends. There's always more that has to be done. And that's okay. That's how it works with aviation. You always want to make sure that safety remains and that you keep updating your systems and vehicles when you find new things. So it's always an ongoing process.
Are you required to undergo a regular performance review with the FAA?
Now it's more of when we have new modifications, but nevertheless, you still have to go with the FAA, especially on the air carrier part. You have to show them that you still, maintain your good status.
Has receiving the Part 135 changed your approach to the business?
So it's another step forward, but we're talking something that's, I'd say, even a bit harder than your usual drone delivery. At the end, we're delivering a box of sushi or a few burritos for dinner. These are really ultra affordable deliveries. So you're certifying an airplane, a commercial airplane, with an entire system that manages everything. And you're using that thing to deliver for just a few dollars. So you have to be ultra efficient and you have to optimize the entire process from the drones themselves all the way to the operation on the ground to make sure that you can generate profit from that process. Part 135 is a huge step forward to showing that this can work and generate profit. But we still have a lot of work in-house to mature the system phase where we break even and start showing that we're generating money per delivery.
When do you think you'll be profitable?
We estimate we'll reach that during 2024. It's really not that far. We've gone through most of the development and regulatory hurdles. There's still things that we have to do, and things takes time for a reason, for a good reason. We have to make sure that our skies stay as safe as they are today. So it's not like a software company where you can compile your code and presto, the day after that, some of your users are using the new version of the system. It doesn't work that way in aviation. You don't want to be the first customer on an airplane where they just, updated the autopilot. And the same with drones because they're aloft as well. So things take time, but our experience so far, we're pretty optimistic about that.
Remind us again which cities that you're currently operating in.
So currently we have 4 stations, 3 in North Carolina and 1 in Texas. In North Carolina, we're active in the suburbs of Raleigh-Durham. And in Texas, we have a station outside of Dallas. And in those stations, we work 7 days a week from 11:30 a.m. until like 8:30 p.m. And if you don't own a backyard in the area, each one of those stations has at least one public spot. So if you have a friend in the vicinity, you can just come and experience those deliveries to one of those public spots as well.
How many deliveries has Flytrex performed?
So last year, we've released that we've done more than 21,000 deliveries in those stations. It's only the beginning, but it's still, as far as we're aware, that's the largest amount that a single company has made when we're talking about home drone deliveries.
From your perspective, do you feel that you've mastered all of the nuances of the final delivery to the customer?
Oh, no, not yet. Currently, it is very smooth, but when we go to, from 21,000 to 210 or 2 million, we still have a lot of things that we have to do to make sure that the customer experience will stay as smooth as it is today.
Any plans to add new cities in the near future?
We'll be announcing that hopefully later this year, but currently it's the 4 stations that we currently have.
Based on your experience, what advice would you give to those that may want to seek a Part 135 certification?
Take a long breath and remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Things are going to take longer than you expect. At the end, you have to remember that you're working with the FAA and not against them. There are people with a lot more experience than we have on the other side. And usually when they ask you about something or they have a comment, it's based on 20, sometimes even more years of experience. So just remember that your goal is to work with them and not against them. Otherwise, it's not going to work. At least that's our approach.
And because it does take so much time, I would imagine that companies really have to be mindful of their financial situation. They have to make sure that they have enough resources for the long haul, right?
That's very much correct. Things take longer, so your budget's going to be higher than you expect until your next milestone. That's another very important point. It's very easy to burn more money, but then you have to raise a lot more money. So be very cautious with how much you spend.
Are you performing drone deliveries outside of the United States?
We do have a small pilot that's been ongoing for a few years now in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, with a local company. But most of our, or I say all of our efforts are focused on the US market.
And you primarily operate in the suburban areas or at the urban fringe.
Correct. And here's the interesting part. Most of the US population, roughly 2/3, live in the suburbs. They own private houses with a backyard or a front lawn. We're talking about more than 82 million backyards. So that's the major market for drone deliveries.
From my time as a city planner, traffic in the urban fringe and suburban areas is always a mess. And at rush hour, no one wants to get on the road to pick something up or go to dinner, especially if they have families.
Today, roughly 90% of out-of-restaurant orders are for pickups, for on-demand delivery, because it's so expensive today on-demand deliveries, and it's a lot easier to just pick it up on your way back from work. So hopefully we can change that number.
If you could, share with us the story behind the idea of drone delivery for restaurants. Where did it come from?
Amit, my co-founder, and I started the company back at the end of 2013. And actually, for the first 2 years, we manufactured and sold black boxes for consumer drones. These were small boxes that connected to your DJI or other drones, and it recorded everything in real time and transmitted it to our database, to our servers. And that was a nice business. In 2015-16 or so, we realized that the killer application for drones is going to be drone deliveries, and we just started focusing on that. In 2017, we were already doing drone deliveries in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, flying above the city beyond visual line of sight. That was a very good experience back then. And then in 2018, I think we started working with the FAA as part of the integration pilot program. And that's where we've been focusing all of our efforts since then.
What have the past 5 years taught you about drone delivery?
So we've learned that customers are eager. And it's not about the drones. The drones, that's nice, but they're eager to pay less to get, a high quality service, meaning faster deliveries. And then your food also gets hotter than with a human courier and driving a car in the suburbs. I think that's the number one thing that we've learned. And besides that, we've learned that on the regulatory side, you've got people who want this to succeed. Again, it's going to take time, but without the cooperation of the FAA, we won't be able to be where we are today.
And again, from a planning perspective, if you can get millions of deliveries by drones, that's a lot of cars that are no longer on the road.
It's a lot greener and a lot less congestion, and let's not forget traffic accidents. You could say that in the long term, we'll be saving lives.
Can you give us an idea of how well received the service has been?
So what we're seeing from our customers is that, at least from the numbers that we have from some of the other on-demand services, our penetration rate is much higher. So, for instance, in Holly Springs, in North Carolina, that's our first big station, roughly 50% of the households have made at least one order with our system. And that's a crazy number. And a year after, we're at more than 40% retention. From the numbers that we know from different other companies, that's way higher than any other on-demand company. People just love the service, they use it. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But comparing to any other on-demand service, it's an order of magnitude better.
Is the secret to profitability just having more drone flights to achieve greater efficiency?
It's more than that. So you touched upon that. Because we basically control most of that technological stack end to end, we can optimize every part of it for that specific need, for a dinner for a family in the suburbs. And once you optimize the entire chain specifically for that, and given enough deliveries, which so far the demand is not the problem, let me put it that way, then you can reach profitability. And I like to give the example of, let's say you're ordering something on Uber Eats or DoorDash. Most likely your courier won't be arriving in a shiny new Tesla. And if you're ordering a pizza, it's not going to arrive in a Mercedes truck. You need the right vehicle for the right purpose. Otherwise, it's not going to make any economical sense. So we've developed a drone and a system that's optimized for high bandwidth, short range, ultra low affordability. That's the key here. We're really bad at anything else besides those burrito deliveries for families in the suburbs. But when doing that, we excel at that.
Yeah, just based on my own personal experience, the third-party delivery services, when you have to factor everything in, it really costs a lot.
It costs that much for a reason. At the end, maybe in Manhattan you can optimize the courier and he's using bikes or electric bikes, so it's a lot more efficient. Once you go to the suburbs, that courier uses a car. He cannot use bikes. So he's making a lot less deliveries per hour because you can't really optimize. Both population and restaurant density is too low. Then you have, because it's a car, you've got all the cost of using a car, including, for instance, third-party liability insurance for commercial activities, which is a lot more expensive than your regular insurance. So when you sum that up, you have a guy driving a car, a one-ton car, to deliver a quarter-pounder. It doesn't make any economical sense. And that's why at the end, DoorDash are not going to pay for that. The restaurants aren't going to pay for that. So the customer pays for that.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that might be thinking about starting a drone business?
I tell him to assume that he's ultra optimistic and that everything he thinks will take at least twice as long as he thinks, and he should be prepared accordingly.
And for my final question, Yariv, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
So there's a saying by, I think it's Douglas Adams, the novelist, who said that the future is already here. It's just not spread out geographically in the same way. So for some towns in North Carolina and Texas, the future is already here. And hopefully in just a few years, that future will be all across the nation.
That's it for episode 394 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Yariv Bash of Flytrex. I want to thank Yariv for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Flytrex or want to connect with Yariv, check out the webpage at flytrex.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.